Forrester did not walk into the Forrester Creations design studio that morning as a genius, a villain, or a saint. He walked in as a man who had just severed the last thread that tethered him to calm, telling his sister and anyone else within earshot that he and Paris were over and that the quiet anchor she had provided was gone, leaving him spinning in a familiar gyre of purpose and panic. A gyre that has swallowed him before and that he believes only one thing can still, the certainty of his parents' vows. He makes it sound noble at first, a son who wants to see his family healed. A boy who once cried in the shadow of a broken home now grown into a man determined to repair the foundation. But underneath the declaration lives an older reflex, the muscle memory of obsession. The small calculations that tighten into plans when loneliness steals the break from his judgment. And the shift is subtle and extra texturage, an insistent reframe of Brooke's latest misstep. A meticulous curation of memories that emphasize Taylor's steadiness and Brooke's volatility until suddenly nothing feels subtle at all because Thomas is awake at 3 in the morning building a calendar of nudges designed to keep his father orbiting Taylor's gravity and to push Brooke one interruption, one misunderstanding, one misinterpreted gesture at a time toward the margins. He tells himself he is simply smoothing the path that fate already paved. But the truth he does not want is that fate does not need burner phones, or anonymized numbers read through disposable apps, or a spreadsheet that maps every potential point of contact between Ridge and Brooke and then assigns it a strategy to dilute, delay, or derail. Yet he builds it anyway because the ache of being enmoored is louder than his scruples, and it hums in his blood that if he can get his parents to the altar, if he can see the ring slip onto Taylor's finger, if he can be applauded by Steffi and Finn and even by a skeptical world for choosing family over fixation, then maybe he will become the man he has promised to be. In the weeks that follow, the campaign hardens, and there are moments when he watches Taylor rehearse vows she is afraid to hope for. When he sees Ridge rub a thumb across the photo of a time when everything felt simpler, when Thomas pauses, when he almost confesses that his gentle edits to reality have become a lattice around it. But the end is so close and he persuades himself that the means are merely guardrails against Brooke's chaos, not a cage, and so he keeps building. Only now he is not alone in the shadow of his strategies because Taylor, who has spent years holding a professional's detachment over a mother's flammable heart, begins to see what he will not say. She sees how often Brooke's calls seem to fail at the crucial moment, how emails arrive an hour too late, how a rumor always a rumor, never a fact lands where it needs to land to loosen Ridge's patience, and she asks her son to swear that he is not, cannot be, rewriting the present to avenge the past, and Thomas swears. But his eyes flicker and the promise sounds too practiced. And that is the first hairline crack that Taylor files away because love makes her want the wedding and training makes her fear the cost. Still the date approaches. The invitations are ink and parchment and hope. And the Forrester estate begins to behave like a living thing braced to witness a long-delayed correction as gossamer fabrics rustle on every mannequin and the great staircase fills with florists and caterers and cousins, and Ridge, after all the circles he has traced around to women, stands straighter as if at last he is finding the line he will not cross. And all of Los Angeles seems to know there will be a reckoning because in this city dreams become architecture and architecture becomes myth. And the myth of Ridge and Taylor has been waiting for a final chapter. Then the day arrives with the clarity of air after rainfall, the kind that makes voices carry and secrets tremble. And Steffi adjusts Taylor's veil with hands that have fought for this moment while Eric murmurs a benediction over a family that has weathered every possible storm except the one they keep conjuring for themselves. And even those who prefer Brooke's fire to Taylor's calm agree to keep their doubts palatable because the ceremony is already humming into motion and the string quartet is braiding melodies that sound like closure. Ridge is at the arch, Taylor is steps away. Thomas is posted at the edge of the aisle with the exact viewpoint from which he can orchestrate a rescue if anything wobbles. Which is to say, he has not stopped choreographing the narrative even now, and it is at precisely that moment, at the edge of promise, that the world intrudes in the shape of a phone. An uninvited tin cry cutting through violins as a uniformed officer strides toward Carter with the coiled urgency of bad news. And then toward Ridge with a whisper that is not a whisper because everyone can feel it in the collective intake of breath. Brooke Logan is missing. It should be impossible because Brooke does not go missing. Brooke storms out. Brooke walks in. Brooke detonates. Brooke forgives. Brooke refuses. Brooke refuses to refuse. But missing is a void, and voids are not her brand, and yet no one can find her. And within minutes, soft concern becomes procedural alarm because her car is still at the house. Her purse on the counter. Her last outgoing call routed to an unknown number that has been active for weeks. Always skirting the edges of her communications with Ridge, fizzling a rendezvous here, complicating a message there. And now it is the last thing the system can see before a silence that feels designed. The ceremony stops without anyone declaring it. The guests begin to murmur the way people do when a narrative they thought they understood blooms new thorns, and Thomas goes still, not because he knows exactly what this is, but because he recognizes the geometry of it, the angles of interference, the pattern of a phone number that never assigns itself a name. And fear washes the blood from his face as an officer confers with IT and looks across the lawn to find him with a gaze that says, "We have located the number's digital footprint and it leads to you." The questions come formal at first. Do you own? Have you ever owned? Have you had access to devices registered to these identifiers? Can we see your phone? Your laptop? Your accounts? And he answers with lawyerly precision, learned the hard way. Because Thomas has been here, he knows how words can be soldered into instruments for or against him. And he insists that he has not contacted Brooke, that any number tied to him must be a misattribution or a hack, that he is not the villain the city likes to repurpose when a twist requires one. And yet even as he speaks, he sees Taylor a few paces away, watching him with the complicated gaze of a mother who will believe her child until the world forces her to revise the belief. And he cannot read her because she is still, very still. The way surgeons are still when hands must not tremble. There is a lull where it seems the momentum will swing toward the station and a day of interviews and a night of headlines. But in that lull, Taylor steps forward, not with a confession, not yet, but with a coaxing that sounds like every bedtime story she ever told a scared child and every debrief she ever delivered to a patient walking the plank between denial and truth. And she says, "Thomas, if there is anything you set in motion that got away from you, if there is any place you think Brooke might be because of a misjudgment, tell me, tell only me. And let me fix this before strangers do." It is the gentlest cut, and it opens him because he has been balancing on a narrow ledge of self-justification for weeks, and the ledge wobbles under the weight of Brooke's absence. And he hears himself talking about a location that exists in his planning documents as a hypothetical safe harbor where a combustible situation could be contained long enough for clarity to return a loft converted into a short-term sublet paid in cash by an LLC. A number that never belonged to him on paper but that he created and tested and then told himself he would never use, and he swears he did not use it, that he did not move from template to execution, that the place is a contingency, not a crime scene. Taylor listens, asks for the address as if she needs to rule it out to silence her own fear. And then she is gone before anyone understands fully that she has left, her steps quick and purposeful. Her phone dark because she does not intend to negotiate this through intermediaries. The drive is a tunnel of red lights that she does not remember obeying. And when she reaches the building, she does not hesitate because hesitation has already cost too much in this family. And the lock yields to the code Thomas muttered in his half-confession. And the smell inside is the smell of fresh paint and recirculated air and something elsey, an expensive perfume gone stale that makes her stomach drop because it means presence. It means Brooke was here, is here, and then she is bound but not broken, furious even in fatigue, trained to fight but cautious enough to wait because waiting has kept her alive in rooms worse than this. And the sight hits Taylor like an X-ray of her own compromised ethics. The words come without ceremony because the heart does not negotiate with the truth in a moment like this. She did it. Not the building of the digital scaffolding, not the months of steering, but the leap across the final line from interference to imprisonment. The decision made in the small hours after too many nights listening to Ridge's ambivalence and too many mornings staring down the possibility that love would once again be a coin, flipped in Brooke's favor. And so she used the tools lying there, gleaming and terrible. And she made a call from the anonymous number. She lured Brooke with the promise of a truce, of a document to sign, of an end to turbulence. And when Brooke arrived, she was persuasion and apology until she was not. Until she was resolve backed by a stun and a zip tie and a practiced hand moving a body that should never have been moved. Taylor cuts the restraints with more care than any ritual demands. Says the words nobody expects to hear from her. This was me, not my son, not a frame, not a glitch. Me and Brooke, to her credit or to her unkillable pride, does not waste a syllable on gloating. She calls the police herself and insists on riding in the first cruiser because optics are oxygen, and she has no intention of letting this story breathe without her supervision. And when the sirens carve a path back to the estate, the wedding guests who remain are already trading the kind of speculation that only families like this can inspire. Rich with subtext and flavored with history. The arrival is operatic stepping out of the car with a blanket she does not need. Taylor stepping out of another with wrists politely cuffed because the uniformed officers are fans and professionals both. Rich taking 2 steps and then freezing as if a spotlight has locked him into the question he has dodged for half his life. Which woman's gravity defines Hyman? The confessions proceed in concentric circles. Taylor to Ridge first, because he must hear from her mouth that she overrode her own training. That she chose an outcome over a process. That she let fear of losing him whisper that desperate measures were merely decisive ones. Then Taylor to Steffi and Thomas, who both lurch toward her as if touch can keep her from a cell. But she lifts a palm to say not yet, and it is not refusal so much as responsibility. The sudden insistence that if she finally crossed the line, she will at least own the footprints she left. Finally Taylor to every camera lens angled over the hedges. Because secrets decay, but statements set. And she seems to understand that the only way to keep this from becoming a generation's worth of poison is to pour it out all at once. When the car door closes behind her and the caravan rolls away, the estate becomes a soundstage without a director, everyone waiting for a cue that does not come. And Thomas is the one who breaks the paralysis because the shape of his remorse is specific, not general. He is not sorry that he wanted the wedding. He is not sorry that he believed his parents could make each other gentler. But he is shattered by the knowledge that he built the blueprint that tempted a good woman into a bad choice. That his need for an ending laid out the props and marked the blocking and then left a mother to improvise a crime. He admits the architecture of his interference to the officers who remain, and he gives them access to the anonymized routes and the accounts and the financial trails hidden by shells within shells. And though his statements complicate nothing about Taylor's guilt, they clarify the ecosystem that made it possible. And Rich listens with a face that has been carved into stoicism by decades of this triangle and then cracked open by an escalation it never quite reached before. And he says very little because anything he says would be a verdict, and he refuses to place the gavel anywhere until morning. But he does ask the quartet to stop playing because beauty feels obscene now. By the time the sun drops, the estate is a museum of scattered vows, petals browning at the edges, chairs askew from hurried exits, and in the forensic quiet that follows a cataclysm the family begins to reorder itself. Steffi marshals counsel and PR. Eric phones a judge whose golf game he knows too well. Finn checks vitals that do not need checking because doing is kinder than waiting. And Thomas goes to a workroom that suddenly looks like a confession booth and folds himself into a chair where he once drafted a line of gowns designed to stitch a family together. And he lets the regret come, whole and unsparing, and he does not ask for it to stop. Because the strangest thing about standing on the far side of a broken line is how sobering the view can babe sees, finally and perfectly. That the thing he has always missed in his rush to curate outcomes is that love does not survive in captivity, not even metaphorical captivity. And that the only way to keep what you want is to create a world where the person you love is free to leave and chooses not to. And he knows he engineered the opposite, and that his mother paid with her freedom for his impatience. When the night is at its thinnest, Rich sits with him and does not offer absolution or blame. Only a silence that feels like a bridge that has not collapsed yet, and in that silence the future begins to flicker trails and headlines and therapy and, if the universe is kind, a chance to burn the old scaffolding and build no more cage in the man who walked into the day unmoored begins, for the first time, to entertain the radical possibility that the only anchor worth trusting is the one you learn to carry inside. Chagged.